To my guest in the Nimataion today is Herne Wyldwood, and together we are spinning a yarn. Herne, you're an Ovate shamanic practitioner, and I'm sure you're fond of stories. Welcome to the show.
Hi, and thanks for having me. Yes, I'm an ovate. It's part of the Druid sort of philosophy. It's more on the magical healing side of things. And yeah, I think that's come about actually, funnily enough, from a lot of the stories that were in my life when I was very young.
Yeah.
Um, I
So,
am a Celtic pagan
mhm.
and an animist, but I didn't start out that way. But I can explain a bit more about that, I guess, when we talk about the story.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what has been your favorite childhood story?
Okay, so I think I was very lucky to grow up in a family where we had quite a secular understanding of religion, but we were still they were still Christian, but but very interested in the folk stories and the old stories and recounting stories of grandparents going to the war or whatever else. So we were always surrounded by things, and I grew up with a dad who didn't necessarily like anything American. So I didn't grow up with the Americanized Disney kind of stuff. It was much more what was British, what was European. So I grew up with things like Aesop's Fables and a story called Not Now Bernard, which I know as a young boy, I was very, very much. It was one of my favorite stories about a kid who was trying to tell his mum there was a monster under the bed. Um, and while that's an important story to me, it was actually the lantern worm, which was the story which got me thinking about other possibilities and how things are not always as they seem, and different things like that.
Hmm. So, I don't know the Langton Worm. Could you summarize it a bit?
Yeah, sure. It takes place in a small town in England, and it's in a medieval period. And it begins with a boy throwing an eel into a well, to sum it up. And then over time, this eel grows and grows and becomes a worm. And then eventually, the boy has to come back and rescue this village from the creature that's grown there. And they have to forge particular spiked armor for him to wear to be able to wrestle it and win over the beast. Um, for me, like I said, I've grown up with stories like Aesop's Fables, and other stories that animals were sentient and talked with humans, and that was great. The lantern worm was something different. It was where something ordinary became something extraordinary, and something which was not a threat to anyone. It was very, very mundane, became something that was a threat to everyone. And that the person that put it there had to go back and make good for their own mistakes. And started off not so much as a villain, more of a bit of a fool, but ends up becoming a hero. So there's a lot going on in this magical brew of a story. It's not a particularly long story at all.
Is it a children's story or because?
Just a folk story, really.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, okay. So, um, what was the specific allure to you? This that you don't have, or you must rise up to your failures, or what?
Partly that, yes.
Hmm.
I think because certainly looking back these days on that story, it goes beyond that enjoying the folk story, enjoying the threads of wisdom that were in that into something that allows you to look back through your own life. I mean, I'm nearly 50 now, so I get to look back and say, well, okay, I could have done better at this, and perhaps I can go through my life and make good on mistakes. And yes, that's certainly a part of it, but it's the whole transition. I mean, in a way, you can almost see this journey in a bit more of a mundane way, but of the journey of the fool's journey in the tarot,
Hmm.
because we start off with a fool who, and the eel ends up in the well. Long story short, and then it comes to being the hero and knowing that you're now patched up with everything that you need in order to combat this beast that's grown because of you. Yes, it's about consequence, but it's about being able to be prepared to deal with that consequence.
Mm. And may I ask, how does the story end? What's the outcome?
I think there are a couple of different tellings of it. But my favorite one, of course, he's victorious. The worm isn't necessarily dispatched. It's given its own place. I think the
Mhm.
version I've heard that it goes into the river, into the sea. And I'm sure there's a further story into that. You could probably tie that into all sorts of myths and legends. And then it's that happily ever after ending. And yes, that's something we all strive for. We know, I think, realistically that it's unlikely, but it's a nice idea.
Mm. That's interesting, isn't it? That the monster is often sent out into the sea.
Yeah,
Um, I'm reminded of Turturith in the Legend of Culhwch and Olwen, when they in the last battle, Arthur can't kill it, but the beast escapes.
yes.
The, uh, why do you think that is important?
I would actually say that this is something that harkens back to the Celtic and maybe even pre-Celtic understanding of the other world. So we understand that obviously we learned a lot about Celtic culture from finds, archaeological finds of deliberately broken tools and artifacts in the water.
Mm,
And the more we study Druidry and the more we study Celtic spirituality, what we know of it, the earlier culture, we understand that the water was seen as a gateway to the other world. Things were deliberately broken or hurt or whatever else and put in there so that in the other world they would be of use to the ancestors, or would potentially be made whole. We know that water was seen as very, very sacred. Um, and I think that um, things like Tortwyth and the lantern worm and many other examples get cast into the sea to become whole again, but in a way that's better for everyone, better for the whole of creation, as it were.
oh yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Absolutely. And you have to other your wishes to give them to the other world. Like you have to put them in the form of sigils or whatever and bury it. So like this broken things or sacrifices you give to the other world. So this eel is something that the hero gives to the other world in the
Yeah.
first place, and then he has um, to live up to it.
Yeah, and it could even be that there's a much earlier story in which probably a less heroic story in which for instance, the eel is fattened up to be given as an offering through the other world, through
Mm.
the water. The well itself, wells are holy places. And potentially it was just a simple act of giving the eel to the well, to the ancestors that way.
hmm hmm So maybe it's about a sacrifice that hasn't been received.
Potentially, or was given in the wrong way, given
Hmm
in ignorance.
Mm, mm. And that's where storytelling comes in, isn't it? To show us opportunities, how to deal with things that went wrong.
Yes,
Uh,
absolutely. It takes time to learn to go away into the world to become a more mature person to then come back and make good with those issues.
That's that's great. I love how stories turn out again and again to be blueprints
Mm.
for our lives. So, in what way did this story specifically affect you? How does it inspire you up until today?
I think earlier on, when I first heard this story, and for many years, it was more about the fact that it represented something to me. It was rather than stories necessarily being imported from elsewhere, this was something that was British. and it showed that we had these old stories, something that predated anything that we were taught in school. In England, certainly when I was being taught at school, we're taught the Second World War and onwards, and very little about everything that happened beforehand. And it's kind of boring because you just got Industrial Revolution, maybe, then war, then history, modern history. So these stories talk to us of a time before that, before the Industrial Revolution, a time where chivalry was still in play. I mean, that may or may not be a good thing. There were certainly some bad things to do with chivalry, but feudalism was the rule of law, and you weren't necessarily dominated by a central government or anything. So as I got older and I started to look at religions in different ways and civilizations and politics, etc., in a different way, it became more and more important because it wasn't just that these stories existed, it was then that these stories had survived to this point. And even though certainly as a young boy, it didn't have any relevance to me more than that, over time that would become a more relevant story into something that it is advice and wisdom.
Mm. Mm. And we're both animists, so maybe you would join me in my notion that stories are beings.
Yes,
And this is a very old being.
yes,
This,
yes, absolutely. And I think if we look at it in a way, it's not so much the storyteller talking about an ignorant person throwing an eel into a well and then whatever happens afterwards. This is the eel teaching us something, because the eel, of course, is a being of wisdom. It comes from the sea, like the salmon in many ways. It's from the
I
sea.
just wanted to mention Fintan in the Irish mythology.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think in England, I think that obviously we don't have many salmon rivers down in the south, or much of the north either. So the eel is a more popular fish,
Mm.
certainly in older times and for poorer people. And so probably carried an awful lot of that same meaning to the people. We've on the East Coast, potentially we have definitely more eels on the East Coast than we do on the West.
Mm. Mm. I'm reminded here in the in Austria and south of Germany, we have a very similar creature. It's called the Haselwurm, the hazelworm.
Mm,
It's also found in a pool, and it carries wisdom. And you just have to you don't. It's a bit like the story of Guion Bach,
mm,
how he became Taliesin.
mm,
Always a young boy who must guard the cauldron where the Hasselworm is being cooked, and some some water or the fat comes to his thumb, and he licks it, and then he can speak the language of the beasts and so on. So that's a mythology that's very, very old and vast.
mm.
And
Potentially, then there is a link that maybe even the lanternworm story began life as the Hasselworm. That could be a thing because it is an English myth, and English being a Germanic culture, it could have spread to the West. And so,
maybe,
yeah. In
yeah,
a Christianized mythology, they would much rather have you going away on a heroic journey and coming back with wisdom rather than through thumb.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, um, as an Ovid, you're a storyteller as well as me.
Sometimes.
So we're somewhere in our life we have tasted this. This.
Yes. Yeah, I think so.
And Herne, thank you so much for bringing this to our attention to remind us that there are beasts that carry wisdom within them. Um, and when we encounter them in the right way, we can connect to this wisdom.
Absolutely.
It has been a great pleasure. Thank you so much.
No, thank you for having me. Really, thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to talking with you again soon.
I hope so.
The world is magical.